Hi theory students. Today we're talking about the first part of the chapter on embellishing tones in four voices. In this first part I'll have some general comments about these embellishments, and then I'll teach you about suspensions and retardations. In general, embellishments are additions to the basic chord structure. They're things that are added on after the four-voice SATB structure is already there. And as such, they are usually notes that are not in the chord. That's one way to tell that something's an embellishment. If we have something like a 1 chord in F, FAC, then all the notes that are not FAC would be part of the embellishments. To learn each one, pay attention to three things. We want to know how the embellishment is approached, in other words, how we get into the embellishment, and the three ways are either by common tone, by step, or by leap. And then we want to know how the embellishment is resolved. Again, resolved either by common tone, by step, or by leap. And then we want to know whether the embellishment falls either on an accented or unaccented place compared to its resolution. It's the meter that tells you where the accents and non-accented places fall. As we have in two voices, a suspension in four voices consists of a consonant preparation before the strong beat, the suspension on the strong beat, and the resolution down by step after the strong beat. The numbering for a suspension still describes the interval that the suspension forms with the bass note. Those intervals might be a 4-3, a 7-6, or a 9-8. Let's look at this example. Here we have this suspension. Let me play it. We're in this key, F. In this example, the F in the soprano is the preparation that's on the unaccented part of the measure. It forms this B flat to F, a perfect fifth with the bass, so that's consonant. It stays while the bass moves. Now the bass is on C, soprano is on F. That's a fourth and that's dissonant. That's our suspension. The F goes down by step. Now it forms a third with the C, and that's our resolution. So the suspension involves the preparation, consonant, the suspension, dissonant in an accented place, and the resolution, consonant, less accented than where the dissonance is. A few more details. In four voices, when we have a 7-6 suspension, it's usually part of a first inversion chord. That makes sense because when we resolve to a sixth, we know it's not going to be a root position chord. The 4-3 and the 9-8 usually resolve to root position chords, but may occasionally resolve to a first inversion chord. And since a 6-4 chord is unstable, we don't find suspensions resolving into the 6-4. In other words, the 6-4 is not going to be the resolution of a suspension. By definition, the 9/8 suspension will have the note of resolution doubled. Here in the bass, that's why it's 9 to 8. So whatever is in the bass may then go to the octave. That's our doubling. The other suspensions usually avoid doubling the note of resolution. In other words, let the suspension have some suspense. Let's go back to this example. So note here in the suspension that I just played, the E is not going to be doubled by one of the other voices. We'll let that resolution be unique in the chord. And the numbering for this, 4, 3, because the interval with the bass is a fourth, going to a third. Now let's look at the example on the right. Here, the 1/6 going to a 4 in the key of F. The 4 is a B flat chord, and we have a rearticulated suspension. Instead of a tie, we just play the C again. Preparation C is consonant with the A. The A moves to B flat, so now the C is dissonant. That's a ninth above the B flat. That goes down by step to another B flat. So in this case, the note of resolution B flat is already there in the bass. That's a feature of the 9/8 suspension. Let me show you a little trick here. Let me erase that part and that part. And let me change this now to a G. And now we're going to a 2/6. Here, in the 2/6, it's not a 7/6 suspension, but rather it's a 9/8. Notice that the outer voices haven't changed. All I changed was the alto voice. In this 9/8 suspension, we also have the B flat present before the resolution. And I guess if I wanted to make this more accurate, I would put a 6 under that figure, because the G over here is a sixth above the B flat over there. We can have some fancier kinds of suspensions. Here I'll show you one in which the bass changes by the time the resolution resolves. We still call this a 9/8 suspension, even though the bass is already moved so that the octave isn't present anymore with the resolution. Here's the example on the right, similar to the one we just saw. Note that this is a 4 chord. Over here the C is a ninth above the B flat, but by the time the C resolves to B flat, the bass has gone up through the passing tone to the third of the chord. That's one way we can do things a little fancier. Another way is to have combined suspensions, 2 or more at the same time, each forming a suspension in resolution with the bass. We hear this very often when we have a 5/7 chord, and the bass goes 5 to 1, but the rest of the chord remains and then resolves later, like this. And finally, we can have embellished suspensions so that before the resolution arrives, the suspension itself can be embellished. It can be followed either by a skip or steps down to the lower neighbor of the resolution, or even a leap down to another chord tone before leaping back up to the resolution. I'll show you a few examples of this. Here, in this progression in D major, we have a 4 to a 3 suspension in the soprano voice. So here are the different ways I can embellish this. Imagine if I went from the note above the C sharp to the note below. And now for something a little bit fancier. Let me erase that. And let me put in not just the B, the lower neighbor, but let me put in the note in between, the C sharp. Something interesting to note here. The resolution of the D, the suspension, should be a C sharp, but that over here on beat 3, that's the real resolution. This first C sharp is not really the resolution, that's just a way to get from the note above the C sharp to the note below by filling in the gap like a passing tone. We consider all of this, those 3 notes, to be an embellished suspension, and the resolution doesn't occur until here. And finally, one more crack at this. Imagine here that we have a leap down to another chord tone A before going up to the C sharp, the resolution. And finally, we'll show you one more trick. This is called a retardation. Think of a retardation as a suspension that resolves up by step instead of down. It's almost always figured as a 7/8, although it could be other notes going up as well, but typically it's a leading tone that's suspended over when the 5 chord resolves to 1. Here's our final example. So now here in the key of C, there's a C. You hear the leading tone B hanging around while the rest of the chord resolves. And then the B, instead of going down like a suspension would, goes up by step. We still don't leap from this, we still step from it, but it goes up instead of down. And that's our retardation, very closely related to the suspension. That's all for part 1.